زيتونة بتتمع زيت للجميع بلا تخوين بلا قطيع والأرض بالصيف وبالشتي تحملني وذنوبي وحسناتي عيلتي وحارتي نشرة أخبار ولسه بتحكي باسم الدار They say it's do or die But when the day is done, what will be left behind? Only you and me with our futures intertwined. We live within the wars, we feel each other's pain. Because of you I know we must choose a different way. יש לה עיניים הכי עצובות בגן והיא עומדת בחורבה שפעם הייתה גן ובוכה על כל אלה שאינם הילדה הכי יפה בגן לשערה עוד ריח השם
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to give everyone here a quick welcome. My name is Rachel Ackerman. I'm the senior rabbi at Temple Shalom, and I'm just so thrilled and inspired to see so many people here today as a congregation that has really been inspired by the type of work that all the presenters here are doing, especially since October 7th. And it is just wonderful to see this room filled with so many people who share the desire to see a peaceful and fulfilling future for Palestinians and Israelis. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming here and to thank all of the organizers for inviting us to host this momentous gathering. So thank you all, welcome, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you for the presentation.
So my name is Gerry Serotta. I used to be the associate rabbi here, but I'm actually welcoming you on behalf of a committee of 6 people in this community who worked very hard for a couple months to put this together. Their names are on the back of the program. Don't clap while I'm talking because we want to get to the program. I just have a couple of words of introduction. We did want to thank Temple Shalom for its hospitality. Also, the many co-sponsors that are on the back of the program. Many of the synagogues and organizations in this community are co-sponsors today. We're especially grateful to Melissa Eisen and David Schneer and Am Kolel for their institutional housing and support of the program. We're grateful for the Jerusalem Youth Chorus. If you heard their music as you came in, the 2 songs were called Home and A Different Way. They were performed by brave Palestinian and Israeli young people. You may have seen them on America's Got Talent, apparently, but I'm sure many more of you saw them in the very moving Israeli-Palestinian Memorial Day ceremony this past year. Micah Hendler, not on the program, but many of you is a demonstration that people are looking for hope, for a vision of how we can bring peace and justice to our sisters, our brothers, and our cousins who share the same homeland, some calling it Palestine, some calling it Eretz Israel. The complicated and tragic situation we are facing can be described in 2 sentences. There's one homeland, the same homeland, which is called by some Palestine and others Israel, or the land of Israel. There are 2 peoples living in that homeland who need to decide how to share it, how to work in partnership for justice and self-determination of 2 peoples who love the same land. We will hear today from representatives of organizations who exemplify a model of partnership between Palestinians and Israeli Jews in striving for a just solution. Each one of them has had to face the tragic reality of extreme violence that was unleashed last October in Israel and subsequently in Gaza and the West Bank, revisiting traumas on two peoples whose suffering did not begin on October 7th. It's been going on for decades, and it's going on as we're sitting here in this lovely room in Chevy Chase, Maryland. They and we are here not because we're optimistic, but because we refuse to give up hope. As Jonathan Sachs wrote, optimism and hope are not the same. Optimism is the belief that the world is changing for the better. Hope is the belief that together we can make the world better. It needs no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to hope. And these representatives of hope, courageous individuals who are here with us, are going to be introduced by a person who has never given up hope. They're fortunate to be networked through the vision of the moderator for this initial discussion, Avi Meyerstein, who some 20 years ago founded ALLMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Following this initial panel, we'll split into 5 discussion groups, which we call tents, and the solidarity and humanitarian relief panel will be in this room, and that will be on Zoom following the break. That's the only one that'll be on Zoom. You can stay here if that's your choice of the 5 panels. We'll return to this room for an inspiring conclusion at 4 p.m. I'm reminded that some of us know how to do this, but put yourself on social media and tell people that you're here and why you're here. That would be a great thing to spread the message of what we're doing here. I want to thank Avi for his support and help in particular, and also Tali Herskovitz of the New Israel Fund. They were of help and inspiring us to get to this day. So Avi, you're the moderator, and thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Serotta, and thank you as well to the entire committee who I first talked to, I don't know, 5, 6 months ago, and they came with this vision.
3 months ago.
3 months ago, okay. It feels like 6 months of work, but it was maybe just 3 months. They came with this vision of opening a space. And to me, that's the most important thing we're going to do today. Opening a space for the voices that we're not hearing nearly enough. We're all feeling this war, some of us quite personally. Many of us have even lost friends and family. We've had so much pain and trauma that it's sometimes hard to see down the road. It's sometimes hard to see beyond our own tent. And all you have to do is open up your social media and it can smell your fear, and then it serves up more of the same. As a result of that, the conversations that we've been having, many of us, at our dining room tables, in our synagogues, and certainly on TV, are presenting this zero-sum reality. The idea is that either you support Israelis or you support Palestinians. It's all or nothing. It's us versus them. But that's the thinking that got us here. And when we think it, and when we say it, the extremists grow stronger. They feed off of this. They recruit off of this. And it's tearing us apart. All you have to look at is the dynamic at our workplaces, our communities, our universities, and you can see what this zero-sum thinking does. Many of us, I suspect, have also felt torn between values, presented with the idea that either we support friends and family in Israel if you're in the Jewish community, or you support Palestinians caught in the crossfire. Either Israel or our values, our other Jewish values of empathy and tikkun olam and caring for the other. These are false binaries and false choices because Israelis and Palestinians' peace and security are completely intertwined. We'll either figure out how to give them both equal measures of peace and security, or this tragedy is just going to go on and on and on. So we're here to open a space for fresh leaders and new ideas and paths towards something better, to reconnect those two parts of our values. And there's really no better time, it strikes me, than in these solemn weeks, when in the Jewish community we're asking deep questions about who we are, but who we can be. How is the world we're living in, and what could it be like? And as we approach a difficult anniversary of October 7th and the start of a war that has taken so many from all of us. We are blessed in this effort with an incredible panel. These are world-renowned speakers who get awards all over the world, who speak at places like Aspen. We would have been lucky to have even one of them, and we have quite a few. I want to just put a couple thoughts in your head as you listen to what unfolds, and we will try to pepper the conversation with more big picture thoughts as we talk about each organization. These are superb representatives of a much larger field. At ALLMEP, we're a network of over 160 organizations, each doing incredible work in its own way. So remember that. They're not working alone. They're part of something much bigger. They're solving the last obstacle to peace, the idea that there's a partner. Think of all the times when peace talks were close, but the publics had not been prepared to turn on a dime and suddenly turn enemies into partners. And think about what you hear most often when you talk to your friends and family and they say, but there's no partner. They're working on that, and they've never missed a day of work. Since October 7th, many of them were hit quite hard. We have organizations that lost quite a few staff and volunteers, and certainly family members. And they haven't missed a day, and they've actually increased their efforts in that time, rolling up their sleeves to solve the urgent crisis all around them, touching every community. And when you listen to them, think about where they came from, because the field that we have, which has tens of thousands of people who've been involved, they don't come out of nowhere. They're all special people, but they're also the products of that ecosystem. We've generated leaders over the last 20 to 30 years who are now coming into their own. So here's where you come in. You may feel hopeless. You may say this was an incredible earthquake and it leaves a deeper ditch of trauma and despair than ever. And you'd be right, but I would also suggest that earthquake shook down a status quo that was frozen for a long time. And coming out of this, we have an unprecedented opening. The question is, what will fill that void? You may feel hopeless and wonder what you can do. So I would say you've taken the first step. You're here, you're listening to them, you're going to reject false binaries, and you can help us turn the one-sided extremists off and turn up the volume on the peace builders. You can help us hold this space that we're opening, hold it open for them, bring their voices to your dining room table, to your synagogue, to your Facebook. Donate to them, and do your friends and family a favor and tell them to do the same, because nothing feels as good as investing in peace. And help us change the conversation so that we can put this at the center of your solidarity, standing in solidarity with the only hope for Israel's long-term security and future, which is peace. With that, I want to turn immediately to our panel and start with Tareq Abu Hamed, Dr. Tareq Abu Hamed, who is the Executive Director of the Aravah Institute for Environmental Studies. That's fair. He's earned it. He's a Palestinian Jerusalemite, a one-time resident of Kibbutz Keturah, and formerly Israel's chief scientist. Tareq, at the Aravah Institute, you've got Jewish and Palestinian young people learning, living, and doing groundbreaking environmental research together. And that's what you all were doing on October 7th and every day since, including then pivoting to save lives in Gaza in response to the humanitarian crisis. Can you give us a look inside what your programs are doing today? How are you and your staff and students and interns of the organization and alumni, how are you navigating this time and building something better?
Okay, thank you, Abby. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great pleasure and an honor to be with you. As a Palestinian from East Jerusalem who've been in this peace building world for many years, I painfully know that Palestinians and Israelis are the farthest apart for decades. But this should not prevent us to feel or lose the hope that we will have a better future for the Palestinians and the Israelis. When we think about our children or grandchildren who live at that part of the world, we have to do everything. We have to make sure that this war is the last one. In order to do that, every project, every activity that the Aravah Institute for Environmental Studies does and will do, and the organizations here will do, we should have people at the center of every project that we do. And this is what we do at the Aravah Institute. Our mission is to advance cross-border environmental cooperation to protect nature, but to bring people together, to use what we call environmental diplomacy, science diplomacy, to bring people into dialogue, to build understanding, to build trust. This is the most scarce resource in the Middle East. Trust. It's not water, It's not technology, it's not natural resources. And in order to build the trust, you have to start by bringing people together. And we do this at the Aravah Institute through different activities. The major one is our academic program. We bring students together for a university level semester. They live together 24/7 in Kibbutz Kturah for 3 to 4 months. And when I say they live together, I mean it. They go to the same dining room, to the same classroom, and at the end of the day, they share rooms. They take academic courses, but they are in dialogue. They talk about conflict, they talk about politics, culture, personal stories, family stories, Nakba, Independence Day, and this is how they build understanding. Dialogue is not a weakness, it's strength. And understanding does not mean that I agree with you. We can disagree, but we can understand each other, and this is what's lacking in the Middle East. I am from East Jerusalem. I have an Israeli ID, which means I travel within Israel. I go to Beersheba, to Yafo, to Akko, to Tel Aviv. At the same time, I go to Jenin, to Nablus, to Bethlehem. And I know for sure that the vast majority of people on both sides wants the peace and wants to live in peace. But at the same time, they doubt that there is a partner on the other side. Why? Because of lack of dialogue, lack of connection between these two societies. And organizations like the Aravah Institute, we create this safe space for people to come together through science, through environmental projects. We have close to 2,000 alumni in the region that they refuse to disconnect. They continue their connection. They meet almost on a weekly basis, discuss ideas. This was before October 7th and also after October 7th. And not only through the academic program, we have several research centers, and at the Aravah Institute, when we say research, we cover the whole spectrum of research, from basic research, applied research, but it's transboundary research on the shared natural resources of the region. We believe that nature knows no borders. It's not only for the pure academic scientific research, that's not only the goal. The goal is to use environment, to use research as a diplomacy tool to bring people together. We are an organization with a mission to build understanding through science. We implement projects in the whole region, from Morocco to the United Arab Emirates, in the West Bank, in the Jordan Valley, in Nablus, in Bethlehem, in Hebron, in the Negev, in Jordan, with our Palestinian partners, with our Jordanian partners. Did this stop after October 7th? No. And you know why? Because of the trust, because we give people the opportunity to talk, to listen, to build understanding, to see the human in the other, and that is the game changer. And when it comes to Gaza and the war, the Aravah Institute worked in Gaza prior to October 7th. We had many projects in Gaza related to water, solar energy, wastewater treatment, environmental issues in Gaza. Did this stop? No, it did not stop. On October 8th, we had a Zoom with our Palestinian partners in Gaza. How should we continue after October 7th? Until today, we're still working with them, implementing projects in Gaza. And by the way, every project we implement in Gaza and in the West Bank, we get the approval of the Israeli civil administration to implement these projects. And again, why is this still working with our Palestinians in partners in Gaza? Again, because of the trust. Trust allows us to have these sustainable, long-standing relationships with our Palestinian partners. We know this is not easy to do such transboundary work in a region that's still navigating its way in this space between war and peace. It's very hard. Peace is difficult, it's fragile, it's volatile, it's very hard to get. And once you get it, it's even harder to hold onto. And why? Because it's about human beings that have been so traumatized, so hurt psychologically and physically. And organizations like the Aravah Institute, again, bring these students, these researchers, these community leaders together to build understanding, to know that in the other side, there is a partner. We refuse, as Palestinians and Israelis, to see the other as enemy. We refuse to stay the silent majority. And through science, through environmental projects on the ground, in equal partnerships with the Palestinians, with the Jordanians, with the Moroccans, we prepare the ground for the future of the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tareq. And I should have said up front, we have done something terribly unfair to our world-renowned panelists, and that is we have given them a very short amount of time to speak because there are so many. So my apologies. Thank you for modeling succinctness. And you can hear almost all of them at the follow-up sessions afterwards. So this is not the only time you'll be hearing from them. I want to turn to Feelbeit. We're incredibly fortunate to have not one but two of Feelbeit's leaders, Karen Brunwasser and Riman Barakat. Feelbeit is a revolutionary cultural center that sits on the seam between East and West Jerusalem. And it literally puts peace building on the map in the city of peace. Karen is a civic activist, co-founder of Mikudeshet and Feelbeit leader. Riman is a veteran peace builder, co-director of the legendary IPCRI, Joint Israeli-Palestinian think tank, and a social entrepreneur. So Karen, we'll start with you. You've created and pushed to open a space where Palestinians and Jews across the city, people who might otherwise never meet, can come together in a deep way. And now that's harder and more meaningful than ever. How do you see this moment affecting Jewish Israelis and their attitudes? How do they relate to your work today? What are some of the most impactful moments you've seen through Feelbeit these last months?
Thanks, Avi.
6 minutes.
For the question, yes, and for everything that ALLMEP does for us at Feelbeit and for everybody here on the panel and for the entire ecosystem. I want to thank the synagogue, Temple Shalom, for having this. And I really just want to say, Riman and I, as we were walking in and we saw this crowd, we were not expecting such a big crowd. And it's so encouraging. It means so much to us to see you all here. It's not something that we take for granted at all. And I'll say I'm talking about the Israeli perspective, I think, we have to tap into that extraordinary trauma that Israelis experienced, Jews experienced, Jewish Israelis and Palestinian Israelis on October 7th. That was not merely the horror of the actual atrocities and their scope and their detail, but it was also this utter upending of our most elementary sense of security. Because what happened was beyond our scope of imagination. It was like when the Trade Center fell down. You couldn't, in the beginning, for those of us old enough to remember, you couldn't understand what you were actually seeing, even though you were seeing it. And that kind of experience where if this happened, what else could happen, sends you into, I think, this very primal tribal place that even people that were very open and active in peace felt very early on. Now, and then you're sort of, I think for a lot of Israelis, they were looking around, and in a city like Jerusalem where Israelis and Palestinians are very integrated in regular life, not in terms of how they live, but in public spaces and in institutions. And I think for a lot of Israelis, they're looking around and they're thinking of the stories that they were hearing about Gazans who had worked in the kibbutzim and had good relations with the kibbutzniks and coming in and being part of October 7th and looking around at the teacher in the gan and at the dentist at the clinic and at the cab driver and saying, what else could happen? And there was this incredible fear. Now, for those of us who have existing, not transactional relationships, not high, to the guy who washes your car or to the dentist who takes care of your teeth, but real deep relationships, we sort of had the opportunity, and we really had to take the lead in that defiance of dehumanization. And for me, at Feelbeit, where we've been working for many, many years to build an Israeli-Palestinian arts organization, I was so privileged because Riman immediately wrote to me and said, "Are you okay? This is horrific." And my other colleagues, also, one of my colleagues, Zudi, like many people in the peace camp, we knew a lot of folks who were directly affected on October 7th, people who lost family members, people who were killed themselves. And we had, just as a team, gone up north and been taken around by a wonderful guy named Maoz Yinon, who runs Avram Hostel. And we were going to collaborate with his organization, and he was supposed to come to Jerusalem on October 9th, and we were supposed to take him around. And on October 7th, his parents were killed at Netiv HaSara, I believe. And one of our colleagues, Zudi Najib from East Jerusalem, he was supposed to have taken him around, and he decided that he was going to go to the funeral, which was an incredibly brave thing to do a few days after all this had happened. And he went, and Maoz hugged him, and he said, "We're going to bring the peace together." And I was so privileged to be able very, very early on to have the humanity restored. And what we do in our organization a lot of times is first we work together on our team, and we do and what works in our team we try to bring to our audiences. And we have this incredible privilege of the arts. That's our sacred tool, all kinds of arts that have the power to humanize across divides when words fail us. And so not long after October 7th, after we had sort of built our own internal resilience, we opened up very, very delicately, very quietly to the general public, mostly turning to folks that we knew at first, with a series called No Words, because there really were no words. And we just invited artists, Israelis and Palestinians, to come into Feelbeit. We were all, by the way, on unpaid leave. We slashed our budgets. We were all volunteering to keep this place going. We had no money to pay the artists, but artists from both sides, some extremely famous artists came to our beautiful cultural center, and with very little production, just brought what they could. And what was really incredible was that people came. Our audiences came, first the ones that were close to us, and slowly, as we felt more confident, larger and larger audiences from the general public. And what we were so privileged to do, and what the arts can do, is allow, from the Israeli perspective, from the Israelis who were so traumatized and afraid of Palestinians, to step back into a space and realize, this is Riman. This is this person who I love and I believe in. And not only who I love and I believe in, but who is not only not a monster, not only a good person, but somebody who's here with me, who came and said, "I'm here with you. We're in this together. We are in this together because we don't want this, and we're going to find a way out together." And I think that that's what we have been bringing, certainly to Israelis, that confidence to step in and then regain your footing and say, "Okay, now I remember there's what happened on October 7th, and there's Hamas, and then there's everybody else." And how am I on time, Avi?
We're wrapping.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
I just want to say, 2 weeks ago, on the Israeli side, we had one of the hardest moments where, for some reason, when the 6 hostages were found murdered 2 weeks ago. This was really such a profoundly devastating moment. And Hirsch Goldberg Pollen is a Jerusalemite. He has family that's very close to Feelbeit, and part of the family has a terrace that overlooks our terrace. And we had a week of really significant artistic programming planned that had all been developed and cultivated for this moment. It was all original work meant to bring healing and understanding in this moment. And all sorts of people were coming back and forth from the Shiva to Feelbeit. And we had this moment that they're looking at our terrace, this part of the family. Can we keep going? And we realized we have to keep going. This was created for this moment. And what was amazing is that people came and realized that, there were protests all over the country, crazy protests. A lot of people went on strike. And we realized we can't go on strike. Will Ben Gvir be happy if we go on strike? Will Bibi be happy if we go on strike? Yes. So we're not going to go on strike. What's happened is that the arts have found this very special role of healing, of bringing together, and thousands of people have come to Feelbeit. Over 7,000 Israelis and Palestinians have come since October 7th. So there's actually hope, I think.
Thank you, Karen. Riman, so you're a native of East Jerusalem. You then went and did some national level peace building, and now you've come back to East Jerusalem to focus on your hometown, to use new tools like the arts. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit, what's the mood like in Jerusalem between communities and from a Palestinian perspective? What role do you see Feelbeit playing, and what kind of impact are you seeing in just a few minutes?
Sure. So first I'll say that as a Palestinian in East Jerusalem and living in East Jerusalem, there isn't equality between Israelis and Palestinians in Jerusalem. We have different statuses, and that has all kinds of different implications. And post-October 7th, the Palestinian community in East Jerusalem definitely felt silenced. We were looked at as, this is a Palestinian, this is an Arab, and so, you need to keep away from Palestinians. Having said that, and I'll say that some members of my own family have been attacked in East Jerusalem, my nephew, for no reason, because of that reaction from Israelis. But where I see, Feelbeit here has offered a lot of answers. And for many, many years, we've been practicing, as Karen mentioned, this muscle of bringing together, of bringing people together, of showing up for each other. And so I'll say that I met Karen in 2014, and that was also a crisis moment that brought me to abandon. I was involved in all kinds of track to diplomacy initiatives and what have you, and I found a different possibility through the arts. What Feelbeit has offered to the community of Palestinians in East Jerusalem is a space where they can be themselves, where they can bring in their own identities without fear. And this is the only place in Jerusalem, maybe a few, it's the house that brings all kinds of different people that are, that believe in this message. And we've seen, it was so important to see at Feelbeit, all these organizations, some of them are sitting here at this table, come through Feelbeit, and they gave us strength and we gave them strength. Lamb for All, standing together, hand in hand, all these organizations have been to Feelbeit. The Aravah Institute, I remember speaking to a group of your students, and they were, and I also saw how they didn't lose hope, and they were they wanted to hear what we were going through and what kind of emotions we needed to show for each other in order for this to happen. Now, what is happening at Feelbeit today? Like the last 3 weeks, we've had peak events of art, of culture. We opened our house every single day, hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians and Israelis together, even in the toughest of times, even in that moment when Karen mentioned where the hostages were brought back, when Gaza was being hit constantly, people showed up from both sides. Never before did we have so many artists, Palestinian artists, every week showing up together with Israeli artists. And that, for me, in and of itself, is a statement. Before October 7th, you know, people were afraid of anti-normalization, BDS, but not after October 7th. And I'm saying that because people are making a very conscious choice. They're making a conscious choice for them to build a better future. And this is what we like to, you know, what we want to prototype at Feelbeit is building that different future where we have a community that's showing up. Yeah.
Thank you, Riman. And I would add your comments about Palestinians inside Israel feeling silenced is super apropos our conversation about opening up spaces, which of course is what you're doing at Feelbeit. We're gonna move to our next speaker. You know, peace building programs, when we think of them at the meta level, it's a pipeline of creating change makers from young to old, from kids in the elementary school to high schoolers to adults. And this is not happening by accident. This has been going on for years, and you heard a little bit of the connectivity between organizations as people go from one to the next and support each other. We've seen how these programs churn out young leaders. And I think the best example to turn to next would be New Story Leadership. Brings 20-something Israeli and Palestinian leaders to Washington, right here in our community, to intern on Capitol Hill, where they learn about policymaking and they learn how to be advocates. Danielle Compton is one of them. She's a recent alum of the program, a US and Israeli citizen and an activist. In response to the war, she and other New Story alumni came together to draft an alternative vision called the Phoenix Plan, which she'll be talking about in one of the discussion groups at more length. But first, Danielle, what was your experience going through NSL? How did it impact you? And what has it meant to be part of that community during this war?
Thank you for that question. I'll talk a little bit about my own personal experience in a moment, but I want to start with mentioning some of the benefits of people-to-people programs, which you've just mentioned some of them as well. And we're all familiar with them. You know, people-to-people programs, they bring people together, they humanize, we get to meet the people from the other side, counteract stereotyping, and generally demonstrate, how what we share as humans is so much greater than what our differences are. And now, more than ever, since October 7, we so very desperately need these benefits. Myself as an Israeli peace builder, I'm witnessing how the ability of the Israeli people or the Jewish Israeli people to empathize with the Palestinians is, whatever ability we had, which was not very much in the past, since October 7 has only been diminishing. So we need these programs so very desperately and urgently, more than ever. And we're all probably very familiar with the challenges of people-to-people programs as well. They're far too few, too small, too short. They're underfunded. There's just getting the people to meet in person is a difficult. Where do we meet? How do we get the people there? Travel issues, visas, not everybody can get a visa. Inclusivity, how do we get all of the people, all of the different communities and social sectors represented in the room? So these are all challenges. The question of normalization as well. So we're all aware of the challenges, we're all aware of the benefits, and we're all aware that we have to find ways to overcome these challenges because the benefits are so great. But I want to expand a little bit on the potential. There's a greater potential, and I would argue that there's a responsibility of people-to-people programs, more than just growing the circles of empathy, more than just getting to know each other on a personal or a human level. People-to-people programs have the potential, and again, I want to emphasize the responsibility to foster shared work, to establish strategic partnership, to provide a platform where Israelis and Palestinians can not only just meet, but work together and address the core issues that are corrupting our respective communities. It's not only about getting to know each other as humans, it's about partnering up and scaling up the work that we can do and scaling up the impact that we can do as individuals or as uninational groups. If people-to-people programs do not do this, if we do not harness this potential, we're doing a disservice to ourselves, to our communities, to the participants of these programs, and to the greater cause. And I'm speaking both to practitioners and donors. This is something that people-to-people programs, a lot of them are already doing, some of them are represented in this room today, but some of them haven't had the opportunity or the resources to scale up and develop into those levels. But thankfully, NSL has been doing just that. After 15 years of bringing young Israelis and Palestinians to DC to learn, to experience decision-making processes on Capitol Hill and to learn how to use our voices to advocate for what we know Israel and Palestine really need. The program we have been taking it to the next level and realizing this potential, this amazing potential and responsibility that this program and organization has. So just a few days after October 7, a group of us alumni, we came together and we wrote a joint statement, one of the very first joint statements calling for a ceasefire and a release of all hostages that was sent out onto Capitol Hill. But obviously, it was clear to us that that is not enough. We need to do more. We decided we need to get together. We need to write a peace plan, a post-war plan, a sort of Marshall Plan, if you'd like. We need to, politicians are not going to do the work for us. We need to write a plan to how do we establish peace? I mean, most people are so hopeless. There's no vision. Our politicians, our leaders have no vision. We have to create it ourselves. So we got together for 5 days, 10 alumni of the New Story Leadership Program got together for 5 days in Geneva, and we drafted what we call the Phoenix Plan. The Phoenix Plan is a 70-page document. We also have an executive summary, which is only 10 pages. It is a comprehensive post-war plan of how to create a reality that is more conducive to peace. It outlines, it's a visionary document. It describes a vision, which is so very rare and needed right now. There's a vacuum of that particular issue. So it describes a vision of what peace would actually look like, what Israel and Palestine could actually look like. But it's also an actionable step-by-step action plan of approaches and solutions that governments, organizations, decision makers, international communities can do right now in order to promote peace. And I will share a lot more about it in the breakout room later, and I'll be more than happy to answer all the questions about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. You talked a little bit about the outcomes, the outputs of these organizations, and one of the ways that that happens most powerfully is through alumni. Another organization with us today, we are also blessed to have two panelists join us, is MEET, the Middle East Entrepreneurs of Tomorrow. In partnership with MIT, it injects itself into the daily lives of Israeli and Palestinian teenagers at a critical time in their lives, taking them on a 3-year journey together to learn about computer science and social entrepreneurship and leadership and problem solving. And then many go on to top schools and successful high-tech careers like our panelists here. The hundreds of alumni in this network themselves lead the network. It's a popular program, and I think this is something to emphasize, which represents a lot of the organizations in our network. They are oversubscribed. They have more people that want to participate than they can accommodate. In MEET's case, they have 1,600 applications every year for 120 spots, and that includes this past year. So with us today, we have Shir Somech, who's a MEET alum now studying at Harvard, and her fellow alum, Leena Abdeen, who is studying at the University of Pennsylvania. Shir and Leena, thank you for traveling down here to be with us. Could you tell us what impact did MEET have on you? What role does it play in your lives now, especially during this horrible war? What is the importance of working with alumni? And what are your hopes and visions for the future?
Thank you for that, Avi. I'm Leena. I'm from Jerusalem, and I'm a freshman at UPenn. So I'm a MEET alum. I did the 3-year program, and it's the reason why I decided to go into CS. And I'm going to talk about a program, an alumni program that I was a part of last year. It's called LEAD. It's an alumni program that launched last year during the war. That focused on leadership and dealing with the conflict firsthand. During LEAD, we were a bunch of Palestinians and Israelis that sat on one table, and we had open conversations about October 7th, about Gaza, about the war. And we were talking about our experiences, and we were talking about our emotions, and we found a place where both Palestinians and Israelis found a place in their hearts to validate and to accept and to really listen to these emotions and to these opinions with open arms and open hearts. In one of the sessions, as I mentioned, it's also about leadership, we talked about negotiation and how there's this concept in negotiation of, Avi, actually you mentioned this in your opening statement, it's us against the problem and not me against you. And in our discussions about the conflict and us trying to gain a deeper understanding of the conflict really put a big emphasis on that concept. Applying that concept to the conflict and seeing how MEET really applies the view of looking at the conflict from a point of view of leadership and innovation and collaboration really just highlights how much resilience comes out of this program. It's really the main message of we can still work together. MEET still was functioning after October 7th, hosting teenagers that are full of opinions and are eager to share their opinions and be very loud and outspoken about them. And we still managed to sit on one table, work on the same projects, talk politics, talk CS, talk entrepreneurship, talk social change. And it's really, it highlights the message of hope to me as a teenager really that just finished high school in the most beautiful way, and it shows just the potential that MEET alumni people have, not only in the professional sector and in whatever career they choose to pursue, but also in making first-hand change in the political sector and in regards to the conflict in the country, or also on college campuses as all of us embark on our college experiences.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Shir. I'm a second-year college student at Harvard University, and I'm from Jerusalem, Israel. I graduated from MEET 10 years ago in 2015, and I've since served in the IDF and the intelligence forces for 5 years. I worked as a software engineer for a startup in Tel Aviv, and most recently I moved to the US for undergrad. So I could really talk in length about the many ways in which MEET has impacted me and shaped my life's trajectory, but I think that it is in times like this that MEET's impact is really put to the test. And so I'll talk about some reflections that I've had this past year and how MEET was put into that. So I moved to the US 1 month before the war broke out. And so since October 7th, I've been mostly on campus and not back home. And while my experiences and hardships on campus are really negligible compared to the atrocities that are going on back home, I think one thing we're all aware of is just the rising hostility towards Jewish students and Israeli students in particular on college campuses in the US and elsewhere. So one of the more devastating realizations that I've had this past year is that as an Israeli, many people will fail to recognize my humanity. Being Israeli or a Zionist often leads to denial of basic empathy from other students. And students on campus have allowed their ideologies to overshadow just basic human decency, believing that, asking an Israeli friend how they're doing and if their family back home is safe is a political statement and taking sides and standing with Israel. Asking a student how they're doing after 1,300 of their people were brutally killed and kidnapped is not a political statement. It's being a human being. But unfortunately, that's something that the smart, bright minds at Harvard have failed to recognize. And as a result of that, many of my Jewish and Israeli friends have lost a lot of friends during this past year at a time where they most needed their support. But as devastating and discouraging as all this was, one thing that really gave me a lot of comfort and hope were my experiences at MEET. At a time where telling people on campus that I was Israeli was really controversial, I could easily and openly and freely talk with my fellow Palestinian alumni who were also studying abroad and going through very similar experiences just as Palestinians. And just 2 weeks ago, on my first day back on campus, when I heard about the devastating news about the 6 hostages who were killed in captivity, it was actually a MEET alumni, a Palestinian MEET alumni, Dima, who I spoke to over Zoom and I broke down to, and she was the person who offered me compassion and support at a time where the people on the Americans and just the people on campus didn't really or couldn't really support me and stand with me. And so I think MEET's greatest achievement lies in its ability to bring together Palestinians and Israelis to just recognize the humanity in one another. This is such a trivial idea, and mentioning it just feels redundant, but if there's one thing I've learned this past year is that it really isn't, it isn't trivial at all. And I think that it is through, all these collaborations and the 3-year program that we have with one another that we're really able to foster this mutual understanding that students on college campuses fail to recognize and will never really be able to understand. And I'll just finish with, this past year, many Palestinian MEET alumni got into top colleges in the US, both Harvard, MIT, UPenn, and I remember that the first thing that came to my mind when I heard about this was that I hope that when they first step foot into these college campuses, they'll remember the 3 years that they spent with their Israeli students in the classroom, and that they'll be able to speak up for us when other students say and express that they feel uncomfortable by our presence in the classroom, because this is something that has happened. And maybe they'll be able to shift a bit of the discourse on campus, and maybe they'll just be able to remind the people who were shouting for a intifada revolution outside my freshman dorm that us Israelis are human as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shir and Leena. I think, Shir, what you just shared reminds me of one of the deep ironies of this situation, which is that an actual Jewish Israeli may find comfort with a group of actual Palestinians running from the mantras and the chants of the diaspora communities here, and it's on both sides, who are fighting a war in a way, an information war, in a way that even goes beyond what people on the ground are experiencing and feeling sometimes. And we have to remember as allies what we're being allies to. And I hope we'll be allies to people like the ones on this panel, rather than being yet more mercenaries in this information war between two supposed sides. In just about 4 or 5 minutes that we have left, I wanted to do a quick follow-up to a couple of our panelists and put to Tareq and Karen maybe, just 2 minutes each if you can. I so often wish that we could have people like you speaking to communities like ours. So in this moment, what would you like a community like this to be doing and saying? What would you like, how would you like them to relate to the conflict, and how would you like them to be supportive? How can they be supportive of what you're doing? Tareq, would you like to start?
Okay, with pleasure. My message would be, it's dialogue. Give it 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Go speak to someone that you totally disagree with. Here you are, the Jewish community, and there's a lot of Muslim Arab Palestinian community. Go listen to them. Tell them, I want just to have a dialogue. I want to listen to your story. They will also hear your story. And this is what we do at the Aravah Institute right now. They are Palestinians, West Bank, Jerusalem, Israelis, and also Israeli Jewish students on campus doing the same. Despite what's happening in Gaza and in the Western Negev and in the northern parts of Israel, through dialogue, you can build understanding. You can give people the opportunity to understand how you got to that point and how they got into that point. And again, I just want to repeat what I said at the beginning. We have to put humans at the center of every action we do. Now we are working at the Aravah Institute for jump-starting a whole plan for Gaza. Rebuilding Gaza will take years, and we're trying to provide Gazans with decentralized technologies for drinking water, electricity production, internet, waste treatment. But it's not only the project, it's not only the technologies. We want to make sure that humans understand and know that there's an organization in Israel that really cares about Palestinians. It's totally normal to feel the pain of the other. Okay, that doubles your pain, but we are humans and we should do that. If I don't cry for the pain of the Israelis, if I don't cry for the pain of the Palestinians, I'm not a human. I cannot continue this work. It's very challenging, but it's doable for a sustainable region.
I agree with everything that Tareq said. It is a bizarre situation that we encounter all the time, where it's easier for us to speak to each other in Jerusalem than it is to come here. And I think that says something about American culture right now. And I think that it's being a mensch, it's being a human being, and it's being, I think, to a certain extent, humble, and understanding that, you know, I don't know, this general notion that there are different opinions, and we need to hear different opinions, and that means also not only between Israelis and Palestinians, but maybe even between right and left in this country, which I know is crazy. But you know, you don't have to agree. But I think that you know, it's not that complicated, and somehow it's gotten so. It's gotten so complicated here to entertain you know, another person's opinion, to hear something that you might not agree with that might be offensive. I think that if we got upset every time somebody said something that was offensive, we would get nowhere. People say things that offend, we just say, oh, you know what, I'd prefer if you said it that way. Be easy, you know, I like it. Or it's just not make a big deal about the little stuff. Keep your eye on the big stuff. I think that's what I would say to.
Thank you both. On the point of different opinions, a lot of people often ask, how do you bring these people together, and do they just all agree on everything? And the answer is no. Generally, it's very hard to agree about the past. You can hear someone else's version of the past that may be very different from your own. Sometimes it's challenging to navigate the present. But through these conversations with different ideas and people, what we find in our space, and we just finished some community-wide surveying and conversations where this was validated, through those conversations, you discover that you share values. And because of those values, even if you can't agree on what happened in the past, you can agree on what to do in the future. And that's what this work is all about. I want to pivot now to our last speaker, who's actually not here with us in person, but rather joining us by Zoom from Israel. We've heard about a number of peace-building initiatives and how they transform and change lives. And one of the big questions is, what happens then? After people go through these programs, what becomes of the people that emerge? Beyond alumni programs, who's going to give them something to do? Where can they come together to mobilize for action? How can they become one big constituency for change? So our next speaker is one of the co-directors of Standing Together, Omdim Biachad, which is doing just that. It's a growing, progressive, grassroots movement mobilizing both Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel to work together for peace, equality, and social justice. They've got thousands of dues-paying members, which, if you work in the nonprofit space, is a pretty big deal. During this war, they have organized and trained a humanitarian guard of volunteers who protected aid trucks on their way to Gaza, or protected shopkeepers in Jerusalem when they were under attack by Jewish extremists. And most recently, they organized tens of thousands of people all around the country to fill 300 trucks of food aid bound for Gaza. So joining us now, here she is Rula Daood from Standing Together. She's their national co-director. Rula, welcome, and thank you for joining us. I know it's very late for you.
Please, thank you.
I wanted to ask you, in the last few weeks, we've seen Standing Together's humanitarian mobilization, and we've also seen 750,000 Israelis in the streets, which, just to put it in perspective, I think that's about 25 million Americans in the streets. It's kind of hard to fathom the magnitude of that. So I wanted to ask you, Rula, what can you tell us about your work during this difficult time? What possibilities do you see? What gives you hope and strength? And what can all of us in America do to help?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thanks for having me and giving us also the place and space to talk. And again, thanks for the wonderful people who I hadn't had, the time to listen to all of them. I am sorry for that. But I will try to answer your questions with the time that I have. But I do want to start maybe with, saying maybe something in many ways, sometimes as a grassroots movement, as people who stand up to work, we forget to acknowledge also maybe some of the feelings that people do have. But we all know and understand that the months following October 7th has been, until this day, a never-ending nightmare. I think it's there are many ways to say and explain, but to all of us, Palestinians and Jews across of Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, all of us have endured an unprecedented violence, loss, and trauma. And these feelings have happened to all of us. We've been deeply hurt by the loss of life across the land, both from a Hamas horrific attack, both from what we are seeing right now, and yes, the bombing and the starvation that is still happening in Gaza until this day. And with each and every day that passes, in many times we feel as if there is no hope, as if our fight is not meeting an end that we want or dream of. But at the same time, and I say it in many places, standing together has started in late 2015. And we've been through many struggles. We've worked for equality, ending of the occupation, environmental justice, different issues within the Israeli society. And when the 7th of October happened, we reacted. We stood up, we talked to our people, and we kind of understood the first 3 days that there is a message, and our message was very clear, but also is very simple, that there is another way. We have seen our country, this government, one of the worst governments in history of Israel, launch countless wars and military operations only to end in the same position. And we can see right now, one of Bibi's most famous sentences is that this time we will eradicate Hamas. And then, as the war goes in, Hamas becomes stronger. And right now, that is happening also. Hamas is stronger in the West Bank. And with this government, with Ben Gvir, he's been able to succeed where Hamas, unfortunately, hasn't been. He was able to initiate real violence in the West Bank. 10 months and Hamas is becoming stronger in the West Bank, but there was no real violence or riots. And it happened only when Ben Gvir and the settlers decided to go inside of Palestinian villages and to have violence within these homes and even, protected by the army. But we understand that there is another way. There is another way to everybody who is living here, because we also believe in a very basic fact. On this land, you have two people living. You have the Jewish people and you have the Palestinian people. None of us is going anywhere. And for both of us, this is a homeland. This is a place that we call home. And I'm not about to give up or leave or go somewhere else, because this is home for me. And standing together is a place where we fight for the home that we live in, both Jews and Palestinians. I think the ability to speak a different language, especially after the 7th of October, where a place where we had Hamas speaking about eradicating all Jews and the Israeli government bombing Gaza and speaking about conquering Gaza and having the whole Israel, we stood up and we said, these messianic ideas are not going to take us anywhere. And in order to have a future for everybody who is living here, we need, first of all, to ask for a ceasefire for this war to stop, for a hostage deal so they can come back home, and so that Palestinians, innocent Palestinians, will stop dying. Today, we see horrible numbers, 40,000 deaths in Gaza and thousands of Israelis, and with each and every day, we see more people being killed. And the 7th of October, coming with this message, many people, and I say that in a way that gives me also hope, standing together has grown. We have more people in our movement. Before the 7th of October, we were 3,500 approximately members, paying members to Standing Together. And today we are 6,000. Our chapters has grown. Our students who are part of Standing Together has become in numbers in thousands. And one of the main protests, we went out to the streets calling for a ceasefire and hostage deal, had brought thousands of people. It's not just the humanitarian guard that enabled us to let people, and people were able to do something in order to feel that they can do something in this horrible war, but it's also understanding that you do that in a group of people. You do it with activists. You are not alone. And in many times in this horrible war, when you come to a point where you kind of have despair within you and you want to sit down and do nothing because you're tired, you look around you and you see a group of people, tens of people, hundreds of people, and thousands of people, and it enables you to have to stop for a bit, to take more, power in order to continue, because you know that other people are basically continuing because you are a part of a bigger grassroots movement. Standing Together has made many campaigns. The one calling for a ceasefire, wanting and demanding a hostage deal, the humanitarian guard, the demonstrations all over Israel, the public campaigns that were held that did impact the discourse inside of the Israeli politics. When we spoke about an alternative, we spoke about stopping this war, and yes, going not just towards negotiations, but also negotiations for Israeli-Palestinian peace. Because we understand, and we know, and we believe, and that is reality, that the only way the Jews inside of Israel will have their safety is when Palestinians get their freedom. And the only way Palestinians will have their freedom is when Jews in Israel have their security. And these both things go hand in hand. And it is a very... And we need to understand that is reality. Millions of Jews living here and millions of Palestinians are living here also. And again, nobody is leaving anywhere. And we have forces who are trying to be bigger than us, demanding for us to live on the sword, to live in a continuous wars each and every year. And we need to know that we have to bring a different voice and an alternative. Politics is about competition. And if there is only one voice, which is right now with a very extreme, right-wing, fascist people in the government calling to conquer Gaza, to conquer Lebanon, to go to Syria, to go even to Jordan and Iraq, and you will say nothing against these people, they will win. And that is politics. You have to bring a different idea. And our idea is about stopping this war, having real equality, and having a place where two people can live in safety, in freedom, and in independence. And with each and every day we go out to the streets, we demand these principles. Because again, we understand that and I'm sorry to say that, but I know many people want to help us. But I do believe down inside of me that the only ones that can really help us are us. Nobody is really gonna come from outside and decide this is the day we will save Israelis and Palestinians. This is the day we will stop the war that is going. No, if people living here, if the Israeli society and also the Palestinian society do not believe that we need a different direction, nothing will change. Yes, pressure from politics from abroad, and especially the US, helps us. When we talk about a ceasefire, when we talk about a deal, it does help us. But as long as we don't have a real political will within people in our society to stop this war, to have real equality, real peace, nothing will really change. And that is what we're doing with our campaign, with our humanitarian guard, with our demonstration. When we go out to the streets, we want to build that political power. And today, after the 7th of October, we've taken it as a mission to build a peace camp that does have within it Jews and Palestinians working towards that goal. Because again, help is very much needed from abroad, but the first thing we must understand, all of us in here, and do, that we need the change to come from within us on this land, so we can really have a future of prosperity and not just surviving in a year or two.
Thank you, Rula. Thank you very much, Rula. And that brings us to the end of our first panel.